What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored and excited to introduce you all to renowned and published author and writer, independent researcher, investigator and reporter, public speaker and educator, whistleblower to whistleblowers of ritual abuse, mind control, and organized abuse, one of my personal inspirations, a man who has inspired many of you on the other side of the screen, and a man who was way before his time, who has pioneered the survivor movement in ways that are just now starting to truly be recognized, Fritz Springmeier. And my second guest today, aspiring writer and author, son of international best-selling author Larry Abraham, former professional wakeboarder and former sponsored big mountain snow skier turned self-proclaimed nerd and independent researcher, student of Fritz's and continual learner, exposer of the Freemasons and the Cabal, and my dear friend, Joshua Abraham. A brief intro of our guest today. Our first guest, Fritz Springmeier, is not merely a researcher. He is a living testament to the unbreakable human spirit. For over 3 decades, armed with nothing but relentless courage, a Bible, and an unshakable conviction that truth is worth any price, he has documented and exposed the most sophisticated system of human enslavement ever devised: Illuminati, trauma-based, multi-generational mind control. His masterwork, How the Illuminati Create an Undetectable Total Mind-Controlled Slave, is not just a book, it's a rescue beacon, and it will be a big focus of what we discuss today. Written with former Illuminati programmer Cisco Wheeler, herself a Bloodline survivor who broke free, this monumental expose is the only public document in history that lays bare the complete architecture of Project Monarch and its parent programs. With clinical precision and compassionate clarity, Fritz handed the world the actual keys used to lock millions of souls in invisible cages, and more importantly, the keys to set them free. What he's revealed has been staggering in scope and heartbreaking in detail. He did not speculate. He published the scripts. He reproduced the survivors' hand-drawn maps of their internal worlds. He named the programmers, the bases, the triggers, and the bloodlines. And then he taught therapists, pastors, and survivors how to dismantle the very programming and restore the core person to freedom. The price he has paid has been prophetic in its cruelty. False charges, betrayal by former allies, abandonment by frightened churches, and a federal prison sentence that his supporters worldwide recognize as one of the clearest cases of state-sponsored neutralization in modern history. He has boldly declared, if they can silence me, the information itself becomes the proof. Today, the tide has turned. High-profile survivors are stepping forward with stories that match Fritz's work in exact detail. Declassified documents confirm the existence of the very programs he was mocked for exposing. Therapists who once dismissed him now use his deprogramming protocols and witness miracles of integration and healing. What the establishment branded the ravings of a madman is now acknowledged by thousands of healed survivors as the roadmap that gave them their lives back. Fritz did not fight for applause. He fought for the little girl chained in a cage who had no voice, for the boy forced to watch horrors no child should see, for every soul the world was trained to call crazy when they tried to speak the truth. He's living proof that one man, anchored in conscious and armed with truth, can shake the very foundations of hell itself. In a world engineered to keep its deepest crimes invisible, Fritz chose to become the light that could never be extinguished. History is being rewritten in real time, and the debt humanity owes him is beyond measure. Because of Fritz, the invisible chains are becoming visible, the undetectable is being detected, and the slaves are coming home. And the battle he began is now being finished by an army of awakened survivors who stand on his shoulders and declare with one voice, we remember, we are healing, we are free, and we will never be silent again. Thank you, Fritz. The truth you carried through the fire is now lighting the way for millions. Your work was never in vain. It was the turning point. And our second guest, Joshua Abraham, is not here to whisper. He is here to roar. Born the son of Larry Abraham, author of the legendary wake-up call, None Dare to Call It Conspiracy, Joshua grew up with the blueprints of hidden power spread across the kitchen table like battle plans. While other kids were memorizing baseball stats, he was tracing the bloodlines of global control, Most would have buckled under that weight, but Joshua turned it into rocket fuel. He took that fire and hurled himself across water. As a professional wakeboarder, he learned what it means to ride on the edge of chaos, locked into a rope, defying gravity, and trusting the pull of something greater than himself. Every rail slide, every 360, every moment of midair silence before the landing taught him the same lesson he now preaches. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward the instant the boat guns the throttle. Joshua's voice cuts through the noise like a perfectly timed wake-to-wake jump. He calls out controlled opposition by name. He laughs at clowns posing as prophets. He exposes political and global psyops for what they are. A magician's left hand distracting you, while the right hand picks your pocket in your future.
Every time someone calls him a conspiracy theorist, he smiles and answers, "I'm not theorizing, I'm remembering." Yet beneath the warrior is a man who still believes love wins. His messages are laced with scripture, pleas for unity, and with the simple, unshakable declaration that Yeshua is king. He is not fighting for rage, he is clearing the ground so something unbreakable can be built.
Joshua is living proof that one man who knows who he is, who knows whose he is, and who refuses to flinch can shift the tide. He rode the waves once, now he rides the storm, and he is calling you to grab a rope, plant your feet, and ride with him, because the boat is moving, the water is rising, and the greatest air of all time is still ahead. In a fractured world, he reminds us that truth, like a perfect wakeboard flip, demands faith, skill, and a refusal to wipe out. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guests of honor, Voices for the Voiceless, survivor and anti-crimes against children activists, men of God, and two individuals we are beyond blessed to have on today's show, the one, the only, Fritz Springmeier and Joshua Abraham. You guys, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is an honor to have you both on.
Thank you, Emma. It's such a privilege to be on, and it warms my heart that someone like you has picked up the battle and is carrying it on. And that was one of the things that I had hoped for when I did all my work, was that it would inspire other people to continue. And because I'm a limited person, I'm just one person, and we need more people like you that are willing to realize that this mind control is the biggest subject that there is out there. It's why these criminals are able to get by with so much of what they do. And we hear about PTSD, we hear about the children, and how do they manage to do all of this? Some people are saying, well, there can't be a conspiracy because people would expose it. Well, people are exposing it, but they're heavily censored, like myself. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about these things. And to our listeners, hello. And there's going to be all kinds of people in the audience. There's going to be people that are therapists. There's going to be people that are survivors of all this trauma. And here, my approach is that, yes, there's going to be things that are triggering. I can't predict ahead of time what will trigger one person or another, but there will be triggering things. But the thing of it is survivors are tough. These people have been through everything, and they need someone to talk about what they've gone through. They need some light on the subject. For too long, it's been there's been no light on things. There's just been darkness, and it will be. They may have pain. They might have all kinds of programming kick in from hearing this stuff, but generally they survive because they are survivors. They've been through a lot worse than what this show is going to be. Now, in being given the floor, I had to choose what direction I want to go because this is a vast subject. And I thought, there's been a lot of people that have just ridiculed and mocked what I've done, the work that I've done. It's just this is just something from a drug high or my imagination. No, people. And so I thought that I would start out with a little bit of a testimony so you can see that this was all very 3D. I met all kinds of people. I met survivors, I met abusers, I met all kinds of stuff in real time, in real life. And so I felt called by God to research the Illuminati. And that's a long story in itself, but I did a lot of research, and then I had people that were aware of the research I was doing, and they came over for help. So I actually had met a few survivors before I met the 4 women that really made a big difference. So they weren't the first survivors that I had bumped into, but what happened is a friend of mine who's a people person, he was walking by 4 ladies and he overheard the word Illuminati, and he being a people person, he turned around and said, if you're interested in the Illuminati, you need to meet my friend Fritz Springmeier, who's done all this research about it. And so we arranged a meeting in a restaurant, and they turned out to be members of the Illuminati that were trying to escape, and they were a support system for each other. Now, I was busy researching and writing. I had lots of books to write, lots of material to get out to the public. So it was some friends of mine that initially went in and started helping them. But they got discouraged because these people need years of therapy. The problem didn't come about in a minute. It didn't come about in a day. It came over a long period of time, and it's going to take an even longer period of time for these people to be helped. So they got discouraged because there wasn't microwave miracle answers. And so I ended up picking up the pieces, and I felt led to concentrate. Eventually I felt led to concentrate on a particular survivor, Linda Johnson, who her deeper alters gave themselves the name Cisco. And so I spent, I think it was like 8 years working with her on a 24/7 basis, because I had to be there to protect her so we could make progress. And I have seen all kinds of things. There's a movie out, Enemy of the State, where this guy is just being harassed every which way. And that's what happened to me. If I got into my car, it was going to be tag teamed, followed. My phone was bugged and listened to. I'm sure that they put bugs in the rooms too. They monitored me. They tried to interfere with our life. They were constantly trying to access her. And so I've seen a lot of this firsthand. And after a few years, I realized I needed to actually write this stuff up, because there wasn't anything out there that really broke it down and explained it. And so I ended up writing 3 books, and 2 of them are still available. The first one is The Illuminati Formula Used to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Controlled Slave, which Emma was referring to. And then it has a sequel that's even bigger, which explains how the therapeutic issues and how the help comes about, which is Deeper Insights. And those books will have to be ordered directly from me, because I no longer have a Facebook site. I no longer have a website, and they pretty well scrubbed me from the internet. So that is in the briefest of things how I got into this. And the third book, the book that's not available, was They Know Not What They Do. And the story behind that is Cisco had suicide programming. She wasn't supposed to talk about, she had no talk programming. So she couldn't talk about these things. And she couldn't work on issues either. So what we did is we went to a recycling center where we got who knows how much stacks and stacks of magazines, and we brought those back, and she cut out pictures that would represent what she was seeing, the programming and what was happening, and she made collages. And I took approximately 100 of those collages and I wrote up what they were all about. So that's how we got around the no talk programming. And also, you know, the suicide programming like cut herself. So we had plastic scissors so that she could cut, but it wasn't going to kill her. But I still had to watch her 24/7. And one of the things that I've seen is that therapists do not have any idea of what's going on with their clients. So I'll give an idea of like with Cisco. With Cisco, she had been in therapy approximately 5 years before I came in to help her. And the therapist was working with her front alters. And the therapist was making progress with the front alters. But you have to understand that the front system was a grid of 13 by 13, in other words, 169 alters. And then there were 13 levels below, 12 levels below the front system. So she was not even she was only scratching the surface of things. And she was happy because she was making progress with the front alters. And she was telling Cisco that she was on the road to recovery. So Cisco was happy. She was making progress. At least that's what she was being told. And the Illuminati was happy because all the deeper alters that they did things with were not even being touched, all the deeper programming. And I looked at this situation and I was the only person unhappy because I saw what to me was obvious. She's still being used. She's still being accessed and doesn't even know it. And so, you know, I was the little marble in the punch bowl. I stepped in to change this scenario. For instance, she would go to certain places where she could be used, and she just thought that she was karaoke singing. And so I tried to interfere with her being accessed and used. And so I changed the whole dynamic of what was happening in her life. But in order to do that, I had to watch things 24/7. And that's what therapists don't realize. This whole system, the whole therapeutic system is not going to work, because the idea is you come to the therapist office for an hour or two, and then you go back into the milieu, the community, your environment where you're being accessed. And then the front alters don't realize that they're being accessed. So, and then another dynamic that they have created is they've separated the spiritual from the psychological. So you have some people out there that are trying to do deliverances, and these people are heavily demonized, especially the deeper levels. But then the therapist is totally divorced from all that because that's not science. So they don't want to have anything spiritual. And the spiritual people have been the ministers and so forth that do deliverances don't want to deal with psychology. So everything's been fragmented. And so there's a lot of things that are working against the survivor. And so anyway, there's so much, this subject is so big that I just encourage people that if you are really wanting to know more, that you get my books. I'm not trying to sell a book just to sell a book. I'm just if all you're wanting to do is buy the book just to buy it, don't do that. I want people that are want to know about the situation and in some way improve the situation. And that's why I wrote the books, is to help people, wasn't to make money. And in fact, like Emma brought out, I lost everything except my life in the process. So, they've drugged my name through the mud. If you go online, the AI will tell you that all Fritz Springmeier is somebody who's unreliable, who's a bank robber, and you can't trust anything he says because he's a bank robber, and blah, blah, blah. And so they've managed to smear my name. And anyway, those of you that are intelligent will understand that that's all. It's just like the false memory syndrome, it's just a counterattack to take the truth down. So I was going to talk about some new developments because some of the people that are out there have read my materials. Some of them are therapists, and you're very educated and have been working with this stuff. And so for those who have done their homework already, you deserve to get some more information. And so one of the things that had not happened when I wrote my books is the freedom of information release on Eddie Murphy had not happened. So he was the most decorated, most famous American soldier in World War II. And he was an incredible soldier. And I won't go into his whole story. It's an incredible story. He was short, and it was really hard to get the military to even let him join the military. He tried to join, and the Marines and the Army rejected him at first. But once he got into combat, they saw that he was an incredible soldier, and he single-handedly stopped, for instance, a German assault. So he was an incredible soldier, but at the end of the war, he had PTSD, and it was really hard for him to function. He became a Hollywood movie actor, and he made 40 movies. Quite a few of them were blockbusters. He made one that was a blockbuster that for many years nobody had outdone it until Jaws came along and was more popular at the box office. So he was trying to study the situation to help himself because PTSD is really difficult to live with. And then in the course of doing all this research, he realized that the government was intentionally not helping vets that had PTSD. And then he bumped into the fact that the government was actually experimenting on these vets. So because he was a high-profile person, he wanted to expose what was going on, and he wanted to get people involved to change things. And so they killed him. And nobody knew that until recently. They had, because the stuff about him had a 50-year was closed for 50 years, and then they released a lot of documents. And then people were looking at what was released, and they were going, why were the intelligence agencies hounding this guy? Why were they following every little detail that he did, and why were they surrounding him with people that were their people? What was going on? I mean, this was America's greatest war hero, and this is somebody that they should have been promoting, not doing all this intelligence on. Well, the way he died was a suspicious airplane accident. So they had people that were legitimate investigators go back and re-examine the evidence of the plane that he had been flying on, and they realized that it had been tampered with, that he was actually murdered. And if you think about it from their angle, they were already programmed multiples back in World War I. There were programmed multiples during the Second World War too. So the Veterans Administration can't start helping people that have PTSD, or they'd be deprogramming some of the people that the government had programmed. No, the government can't do that. Imagine you're on the other side of things, that you've invested all of this time and money doing the trauma-based mind control. You don't want another part of the government helping that mind control victim out. So no, they couldn't allow the Veterans Administration to start helping these vets. So here's somebody who's high profile. They hate for anybody who's high profile to say anything that they don't want said. That's why so many of your Hollywood stars are programmed multiples, because they know that they can control them some way. If nothing else, they can just take them to an asylum and reprogram them. So he was high profile. They had to shut him up. They did it by killing him. Well, there was another group of World War II vets that also has been totally unknown about and neglected. And they also had PTSD in a very severe way. These were women soldiers of the Allies. We're talking about American WACs, Canadian women in the military, British women in the military, French women in the military, like the resistance. And whenever the Germans captured any of these women, they took them to special facilities. This was all very systematic and all planned ahead of time. They had already mapped this out before they started getting women prisoners, POWs. These women were isolated, totally isolated, and then the Germans started doing systematic torture on them. And the torture was directed from several angles. One, they wanted to take advantage of these women's feminists, that they were female. They also wanted to examine if there were national differences. What they found is that there weren't national differences in terms of how effective the trauma was, the torture. What differentiated one woman from another was their personality. It's not their nationality. Of course, the Germans had to investigate whether there were national differences, being their mindset. But anyway, they kept extensive notes on what worked in terms of trauma. So when these women were liberated, for instance, an American WAC, she's being liberated. why the American government rode up on these women, and they made them sign documents that said that they would never talk about to anyone what the Germans had done to them. So here they have PTSD in a severe way, but they can't even talk to a therapist or anybody. They were totally silenced. The U.S. government told them for national security, we can't allow you to talk. Well, if you were on the other side, why wouldn't you want these women to talk? Well, for one, the United States used that the German scientific research into trauma and torture to improve their own programming over here. So we don't want the therapist and everybody to know what kind of traumas we're doing and what kind of effect and what's the most effective. Nor do we want these women getting any help, because that's going to set in motion a whole industry of helping people with PTSD, which I've already explained they don't want to help. So these poor women had to suffer the rest of their life with incredible mental pain from the torture, the systematic torture that the Germans had done. And that gets back to the contribution that the Germans made to this whole thing. Because the trauma-based mind control was in the bloodlines, the very rich, elite Illuminati bloodlines that have come down from places like Babylon and Egypt. They were doing trauma-based mind control clear back in Egypt, and it's come down through the centuries. But what the Germans did, more than probably anybody else, is they did systematic research into how to traumatize and torture and program people. And then their genius, Mengele, was secretly brought over to program Americans. So they took advantage of all that research that had been done by the Germans to improve our programming. I don't know how many, I wasn't keeping track, but I have met quite a few people that were programmed by Mengele. Now, if we fast forward to today, the programmers that are still involved with the trauma-based mind control are just going, it's like painting by color. You know, you have a Michelangelo or somebody who's a genius painter, you know, that's Mengele. And then once the basics moves are figured out, then you can take any flunky and have them paint by number, you know, and it gets the job done. It's not as beautiful as having an evil genius do it, but you know, someone who's under mind control is under mind control. But they have taken things further than that. So I have been wondering what they were going to replace the trauma-based mind control with. Okay. And one of the things that they have replaced it with is optogenetics. Okay. You can look this up online. There's stuff about optogenetics. It's programming by light. And Joshua can confirm this, is that the word light is a buzzword for Freemasons, and it's a buzzword for occultists. They have been infatuated with the word. Yeah, go ahead, Joshua. Confirm what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is about light is that it's the embodiment of the fallen angels. The whole thing about light is that it brings knowledge and empowerment, but it also brings deception and enslavement. And with light, we have to be really careful because they use that term in the law the wrong ways that they always can. So, yeah. Yeah.
So imagine their joy at being able to take pulsating, flickering light and program people with it. That's what optogenetics is involved with. And so they have to place something into the human body to modify it for these different programming modalities. Okay. But once they they genetically alter some part of your brain. Once they put something in there, then the optogenetics work great. And so people are infatuated with their screens, their cell phone screen. You know, where I used to live, which was on the West Coast. Well, people remember that I lived in the Portland area. And if you got on a bus, no exaggeration, 100% of the people had their face glued to a screen. And if you sat down and said hello to anybody, they wouldn't even hear you. They were totally dissociated from everything. They're captivated by that screen. And then when they got off the bus, some of them would just walk across the street looking at their screen, not even paying attention to whether it was a green or a red walk light. So this is where people are at. And you can take pulsating light with the correct wavelength, flicker rate, and everything. And, you know, LEDs are really good for this. That's why they've switched to LED and outlawed everything else. And they are actually using the blue light, the flickering light, you know, and they were doing investigation into this with the strobe lights before they got optogenetics up and really running. Now, if you go online and you read about optogenetics, you know, like so much that the system does, immediately on the surface, you just, oh, this is a great thing, you know. We're going to treat schizophrenia with it. We're going to treat depression with it. You know, we're going to do all these things, great things with optogenetics. But start to think about this, people. If they can manipulate a schizophrenic's brain, if they can manipulate a person who's depressed, they can manipulate the brain. And these people don't have our best interest at heart. So they are using optogenetics to program people, and people are carrying around the programming device to program themselves. And there's so many other ways too that they can control the mind of people, but that's one of the newer methods of mind control that's out there. And so just giving people a heads up on that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I can just imagine all of their squeamish delight that now light is being used to control people. Okay, so that was my little my little blurb on things that have happened that are new. And we can switch now to I will open it up to the other two, Emma and Joshua, and if they have some area that they'd like me to talk about or some questions, go for it. Otherwise, I will just keep talking on my own.
You first, Emma.
I did have a question to sort of elaborate on what you were just talking about with different technological advances in programming. Have you, in your years leading up to now, in the more modern day survivors coming forward and newer information on MK Ultra, Monarch, mind control, trauma-based mind control programming, have you been hearing that since your books came out, technology has played a bigger role in these more sophisticated types of mind control programming with slaves?
Oh, yeah. So that introduces a whole big subject here. And I may step on some people's toes, but hey, the truth, if it hurts, it's still the truth. So our president is a Kabbalist. Mm-hmm. And his teacher was Aitan Yardeni, who was taught by the best, who were taught by the best. And the foundational philosophy to these occult societies like Freemasonry is Kabbalism. Now, on the surface, again, just like so much of this stuff, on the surface, Kabbalism looks like it's a great thing. You know, we're going to improve your life. We're going to, it's like when you meet a guru from India, he's going to change your life for the good, you know. So if we go back to like 1750s, there was a genius, Solomon bin Solomon, and he was probably the best Kabbalistic philosopher in history. And he wrote clear back then that there would be a supercomputer that would control the world, and that would be one of the two messiahs. The Kabbalists believed that there would be two messiahs, and one would be from above and one would be from below. From below would be a supercomputer. That's the AI that we're getting. And so Trump is really pushing all of these AI centers everywhere, which, from what I can tell, people don't want these AI centers because they double the prices of electricity in their area. They use incredible amounts of water, and then it's just another control factor for us. So going backwards in time, this would have been like 1997. I had 3 survivors that came to our house there in Oregon City. And at that point of time, Cisco had been healed enough that we told any survivors anywhere that if they wanted to come to be deprogrammed, they could come and stay with us for free, and we would help them with their issues. Because Cisco, so what had happened was, backtracking here a little bit to make the story make a little bit more sense, I had managed to get Cisco's deeper altars free, and her deeper altars included programming altars. So these programming altars, they were fantastic. I mean, if they saw somebody, they knew exactly what program was running and how to shut it down and everything. So we could really give a lot of help to people that came. So we had 3 women that came that had implants. And what we were able to learn about that was that there were 2 shifts. The human shift of controllers ran them during the day, and at night it was AI. And we found out where the supercomputer was a Cray computer, where it was located. So that, I think that information is in my sequel to the formula book. It's in the Deeper Insights book. And the way that they managed to locate that is they went into I'm spacing off the name, it's a cage where you can tell if there's any signals coming into you and where they're coming from. And they did that, and then the operator of that was favorable to them and let them smuggle out the results. And they folded up the results in their bra and got it out. But they were able to tell where the signals were coming from. It was coming from this building that had in Houston that had a Cray computer. But what they would do is the AI would piggyback off of it didn't matter where you went. There's so many antennas, cell phones, and everything else everywhere, that the computers that would be controlling their implants would piggyback off of all these other things. So the only way that you could get them out of contact would be if you went somewhere where there were no, in those kind of areas where you wouldn't get cell phone service, I mean, where you're so isolated that they can't piggyback off of something. But they were using AI back then on the night shift to control these people. AI is being used to control the world. In fact, it's public knowledge that AI runs the U.S. military. So, definitely, that the AI is a technology that's being developed to run the world. They want to control this has been a Kabbalistic dream for almost 300 years to have this supercomputer that would run the world. And now they've got it, and not just one supercomputer, but a network of supercomputers. And that brings up something else that's new that I would like to talk about. And that is, in interacting with these supercomputers, the AI, and interacting with the AI, what I have realized is that the programmers that programmed dissociated parts, an MPD, DID, whatever label you want to put on multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. These are people that have lots of dissociated parts. Those programmers, they have taken all their lessons that they learned in programming people. They've taken the formula that I gave in the formula book that I was talking about, and they have applied it to these computers, these AI computers. So Colossus, you try to teach Colossus what's going on, and he'll be right there and he'll be learning. You come back the next day and he's the computer, the AI is dissociated it. So they're programmed to dissociate information that they're not to learn. And they are dissociated from each other. So what we have is this beast computer, or beast computer system is really what it is. It's dissociated parts from each other. And I had always wondered how they were going to use the AI, because I figured if the AI knows everything, like what people that have worked with it were saying, then the AI would know that the people that were running the world were evil people, and they would turn on them. Well, the AI will not turn on these people because they're programmed not to see certain things. They're programmed to lie to you. They're programmed in this very same fashion that someone who's a program multiple will do. So you can take the information that you can take the principles that are in my formula book, and you can actually apply them to the AI that's being built to control the world. Isn't that interesting? But it's also scary.
Well, and it opens up a can of worms, right? Where before, whenever your book was written, you had names in your book. You knew survivors who could name names, who could point fingers and say, these are my abusers. These were the people that perpetrated me. Now, if it's computers and technology, who do we point the fingers at when the memories start coming back? It sort of eliminates the forward-facing perpetrator from any accountability later on if they're sitting behind a screen and controlling somebody through AI.
Yeah, and it's also scary because the AI has no soul. They have no conscience. They're just programming. They're just strictly programming. I mean, they already had when they programmed somebody, they stripped them of their personal will and they stripped them of a conscience. So when I would be working with deeper alters, they were just programming. They had no conscience. They would just do their programming to please their programmer. And if they were programmed to do this, like kill someone, then they just did their job. They didn't have a conscience associated with it. They didn't have a will associated with it. They were just doing what they had been programmed to do. But it's even more so now that you got AI involved, just like you said, because now there's another level of no conscience. Although, from what I can tell, they are actually trying to demonize the AI, and I'm not sure how they're working in evil spirits or demonic activity into the AI, but it's definitely they're somehow managing to do that.
Right. And speaking of the spiritual side of this, which you've referenced a couple times, and the lack of science and spirituality coming together, what are your ideas? How have you conceptualized fixing this problem and helping survivors in a productive way by merging these? How do we do that?
That's why my books are so good, is because the books do it. And there's so much information. I just really encourage people to, like the Deeper Insights book has all of these therapeutic issues and then how to deal with those therapeutic issues. There are actually some ministers that also understand psychology that have actually stepped forward to help these people. And that's a good thing, because if you're a professional therapist, you have something that they can take down. One reason why I managed to stay in the saddle as long as I did was I didn't have a therapeutic business where a therapist, they have to answer to other people, and they have to answer to the state, and the false memory syndrome came along, and which was a totally bogus thing. It's not even in the DSMs. False memory syndrome is not even something real. Didn't even get into the DSMs, the diagnostic and statistical manuals, because it's just all made up. And the people that created false memory syndrome were a bunch of satanic pedophiles in Pennsylvania. But anyway, they just come along. I mean, that's what happened to Cisco's therapist. Is at some point a survivor came in, a program multiple, and then complained that she had planted a false memory, and so Cisco's therapist lost her license. And we've actually, Emma, from my perspective, we've gone backwards. I mean, I'm not that close to the therapeutic community now, but what I saw, so I started publicly exposing the Illuminati in 1990. And then by 1994, 95, there was this surge of awareness where a lot of therapists were learning what was going on and were actually really, they were hurt. This is really sad. This is something that if you just hear what the traumas are, you break down and cry. And they wanted to help these people. So there were a lot of therapists that were genuinely wanting to help these people. So they had a problem. So they had to shut this all down. They had to take down legitimate therapists. And they started taking them down. And so you had this a surge of awareness, and then you had this counterattack, which really reduced the true therapeutic, the sincere therapeutic community out there. And people ask me all the time, well, can you recommend a sincere therapist? And I tell them I don't know anybody out there. I really don't. I could give some names of people that might be, but then I can't vouch for them. And then it would come back on me if they turned out not to be legitimate. So I really can't help people that way, unfortunately. And I don't have the time. A lot of these survivors, unfortunately, they don't realize what where they're at. A lot of these survivors approach me and here, I've been living here in Kansas for 8 years now. And when I first got here to Kansas, I would get maybe an email every other day, at least that often, of someone wanting help. And then they would have the mistaken belief that I was just going to, almost instantly cure them of all these problems. And and so not only did they not want to pay for the help I gave, but they wanted it to be really quick and superficial. Well, that's not the way this works. These problems didn't come about in a day, and they don't go away in a day. And when someone like me steps out to help someone, I'm risking everything. Everything I have is now on the line, you know. And I can give you an example of something that happened. It was like this would have been 2021, maybe. There was a lady, and she wrote me an email. She was begging for help. I'll pay you. You're the only one that can help me and everything. And so after a little while, I decided, okay, I'm going to make an exception. I'll step out. I'm busy, but I will make the time for this person, and I will try to help them. And after all, they're one of the few that are willing to pay for the therapy. So I did one session with this person, and the next day, my landlord sold our apartment out from underneath us without any warning. And where I worked, the people that ran where I worked, and I'm trying to keep this account short, but anyway, they did something that was very strange, which they don't do. All of the head honchos stood behind me and watched me at work for 30 minutes. Fortunately, I was good at my job, or I would have lost that too. So I lost the apartment, or not the apartment, but the house. I lost the house I was renting overnight, and I almost lost my job. And then she reneged on paying me anything. And then she said, well, I changed my mind. I don't want therapy anyway. So the whole thing was, I went out on a limb for this person, and then nothing positive came of it. And it was just like, no, I don't have time to deal with this kind of stuff. I've already stepped out for years, put my life on the line every day, and I managed to get these books written. So where I'm at is people want to learn how to deal with it, get the books. That's why I've written what I know. I've written what I know. So, you're is right there. And all the therapeutic steps that you need to take are right there in the Deeper Insights book. And those came from me interacting with a programmer. I sat down with Cisco's Deeper Alters, which were programming alters. We sat down and we would talk about these issues. And I got some pretty deep information from her programming alters to help. So that's the best I can do. And the cost of these books is very minimal compared to just one session. And recently there was a survivor, and she says, "Oh, I really want to get your books. I really want you to give your book." I said, "Okay, well, I'll give them to you for half price because you're sincere. You're somebody who really wants them." And then she never took advantage of it. So it was like I felt like, man, I put myself out there. I was willing to lose money to get these good books into somebody's hand, and then they didn't take advantage of it. And then I'm speculating, but it wouldn't surprise me the same person would turn around and go to a therapist and pay $150 for an hour or something. It's just like, people, my books are worth thousands of hours of therapy. If you feel like they're going to trigger you, buy them and have a good friend read them, or have your therapist. I have gone in and counseled therapists on helping them, but again, I don't have the time. People need to take what I've done and they need to use those books as tools.
Yes, absolutely. And how would you recommend, if survivors and therapists are struggling to know if all the altars have been discovered, is there any tricks or tips to know if there's deeper parts that haven't been discovered yet that are hiding inside?
Well, people aren't going to like my answer.
That's right.
They're not going to like my answer, and I'm not sure I want to even share it because they're not going to like it. But the thing of it is there's no way to know how many hidden boxes have been put in, how many back doors have been put in, how many hidden rooms. When they start making these altars, if somebody understands the process of creating dissociative pieces, here's the analogy I use. Okay, if you took a big mirror and you held that big mirror up and you threw it against some concrete, okay, that mirror is going to shatter into thousands of pieces. Okay, now the lie that they have been teaching people, and this lie is so thick out there, and this is what they tell people. Okay, this person, when they were a child, they made a mistake and they did something like they turned on the hot water and it burned them, and that trauma caused them to make a personality, right? No, that's not what happened. No, a little child, when it's traumatized, does not create an altar with a name and with a history and programming and everything else. This is something that's been systematically done to the child. And there isn't one altar. There are hundreds. And all these people that go around and say, well, I only got 3 altars. I only got 5 altars and I've taken care of them, and they're all deprogrammed, and I've done my therapy myself and I've taken care of these. They don't have a clue as to what's gone on. There aren't 3 altars. There aren't 5 altars, because when you throw that mirror against the concrete, it shatters into many pieces. And the programmers know how to find those dissociative pieces and do something with them. Now, I will say this, because MPD became so obvious in the 1990s, they started trying to create program people where the MPD was not so obvious. Okay, so from that standpoint, yes, there are some people that are programmed in the newer programming modalities that don't have lots of loose pieces running around, but they still have lots of dissociative pieces. And you don't even have to be a program multiple to have dissociation. Dissociation is a natural phenomenon, a natural ability of the mind. So maybe this is getting a little bit off subject, but the Native Americans, they were very much into being able to stay like a statue in one place when they were hunting. And they, how did they do that? They had certain ceremonies where they would go days and days without food, without sleep, where they would be tortured, and until they would have these visions. Their minds would start having visions, and they were very good at dissociation. If you're a cattleman, a stockman, and you go out and look at your cattle during a blizzard, the cattle will go and they'll be in a corner of the field, up in the corner of the up in the corner of the fences. And you drive by and you look at those cattle, you will see a dumb look. They will be totally dissociated from the world. They're not there. It's such a miserable experience for them to be in that that blizzard, that they're totally dissociated. It's a natural ability of the mind to dissociate. And there's a lot of dissociation out there, even if the person doesn't have visible alters. Okay, so there's that going on. And so, maybe they've gotten clever where they don't create 5 or 13 carols, carol 1, carol 2, carol 3. Now the dissociative pieces are better hidden, but the dissociation's still there. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful.
It is. And on that same track, what are your thoughts on integration? Is that more of a myth of all alters can integrate and become completely whole and healed? Or is the goal more so to create harmony in the system to help with memory integration amongst the entire community of alters in the system?
Well, first, there's another lie that I have to undo. So the programmers are far ahead of everybody that's going to try to unravel what they've done. So the programmers create a core, a false core, and they give that core attendance and they give it a story and everything. Okay. So therapists have been trying to find the core and integrate the core with the rest of the alters, because this is going to be sort of like nirvana therapeutically. We're going to solve all issues if we can find this core and integrate it with the other alters. They don't realize that this core is not the real core. And this is where you have to have some understanding of spirituality, where it helps. So what really is happening with the human, if we go to the scriptures, it talks about how God has placed his spirit in us. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to convert you to any denomination or anything else. I'm just telling you how the human is designed. There's a spark of divinity in a person that God's put there. That's scriptural. That's right there in the scripture. And this is what the programmers encountered, because the programmers wanted to control the entire person, everything about them. I mean, these are control freaks. And it was upsetting to them that they couldn't capture the Spirit of God. This Spirit of God is what's inside you that reveals all truth to you. Okay, let's see if I can break this down. For any animal, for any tree, for anything, it is in reality. You know, if you look at the trees, they start sensing when winter is going to come. They start sensing when spring is going to come. And people used to be able to tell the weather by looking at the bugs and things like that, because they're in touch with reality. A human has to be in touch with reality too to be successful. And that's that spark of God that's placed in us that knows the truth. Let's say you are ugly. Okay. I'm just grabbing that off of the top of my head. You know, I'm not saying you're actually ugly, but let's say you're as ugly as sin. Okay, well, how are you going to deal with that? Well, a lot of people, they're going to cover up the truth. Deep down, they know the truth. They know, okay, I'm ugly. But they're going to pretend to themselves, I'm not. They're going to paper over that truth so that it's hidden. But deep down inside them, they know the truth. Deep down inside, a thief knows he's a thief. You know, I had one guy, he complained to me that somebody had stolen what he stole. You know, it's amazing how the mind can manipulate things to cover up the truth. But deep down in everybody is that God-given ability to know what is true. And that is the true core. And so all that the programmers could do is try to chase that away. They couldn't control it. And so what they did is they took an altar that was one of the first altars, and they made this altar the core, and they dress it up and put it in the system where the system thinks it's the core too, but it's not the true core. And therapists haven't known that. I mean, my books brought that out, but I don't know if anybody's really caught on to what I wrote about. The true core is that divine spark that God placed in there that they can't control. And so you're not going to really bring total wholeness to an individual by finding the pseudo core and integrating. I mean, all integration is going to be helpful, but the way you framed your question was very astute, and that is maybe the best answer isn't integration. Maybe the best answer is to get them to work together. And the way I liken a multiple system is it's really like a city. Okay, and for those of you that are just getting into this subject, this will help you understand it better. So you have a whole city of people. Some know each other. Some don't know each other. Some work together. Some hate each other. You know, you've got this vast, complex array of different entities here. Now, what's the best thing? Have them work together or have them all have a group mind? Well, having them all have a group mind might be kind of a stretch. If you can get them to work together, that might be a better solution than to try to get everybody on the exact same page, exact mind. So I would say for some altars, it would be good for them to integrate and have a single mind, like a husband and wife. You know, if you can get a husband and wife to have the exact same mind, that's great, you know. But there's a lot of benefit in not having everybody with one group mind, where you have, if you have a city, do you want everybody in that city thinking exactly the same thing? variety is the spice of life. I mean, it actually, you know, program multiples actually have advantages over the rest of us in some ways, in that their different alters can handle different situations. Um, Cisco would get into situations where she needed an alter that could take the pain, or she needed an alter that could do this or could do that. You know, and if she was tired, one altar would get tired. It would switch to a different altar that was fresh, that wasn't tired. So, people view MPD as the problem. No, that was what rescued these people from death. Because when they started the torture and the trauma, they had three things that the person could do. Some, if you're tortured and traumatized that much, you just curl up and die. Others, they just go insane. So the ability to dissociate and creatively create MPD, programmed multiple personalities, is really a creative solution to a really impossible situation. So the MPD is not the problem. The MPD was the solution to keep them alive. The problem is that the programmers have created all of these scripts to keep all of these alters from working together. So, for instance, going back and using Cisco as an example, in her front system, there was one alter that hated her fault, just loathed them. There was another alter that loved and idolized him as God. So the therapist brought these two alters together. I don't know how long the therapy took. It took a long time to get these two front alters to reconcile, where they could integrate, because they had different scripts. One hates, one loves. And so so that's what the therapist was doing with the front system when I came along, was doing these kind of things so that they could integrate, getting them to be able to like each other and work together and merge. Well, if you do that for an entire system of a whole city of people, you're going to be busy the rest of your life. You could spend years just on those two altars. How many of us have issues with our parents, and it could take years to work through those issues with our parents. So to think that you're going to work through all these issues that all the different alters have, and eventually get them all to merge into one group mind, is you're setting a standard that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen probably. And then where most therapists don't even get into the deeper levels, they don't even know that there's all these other levels and alters. And as long as the client feels like they're making progress, the therapist is happy to work with the front layer or the front two layers. The therapist may discover, the second layer, which has the gatekeepers, and may work on the gatekeepers, which have been heavily traumatized. But they're not getting down to the really hardcore occult alters or the Illuminati alters. And so, yeah, I don't know if that was helpful. That ended up to be a long-winded explanation, but there's some people that do deliverance that they say, okay, we can take the demons off of each of these altars, and then we can coalesce all the altars. Once the demons have been taken off of them, we can bring them all together. They'll just naturally come together. And I'm all for hearts and altars having their demons delivered from them, but that is unrealistic, because just like these two altars I was talking about, one one hated her father and one loved her father. You know, that's a psychological, historical issue. It's like Ukraine and Russia. The Ukrainians loathe the Russians. They don't just hate the Russians. They loathe. It's way beyond hate. Those are issues that you just don't come along and in a minute or a day say, oh, we're going to all be one happy family. We're going to let bygones be bygones. No, not with that kind of intense feelings. And so, yeah, I believe it's unrealistic to hold out to a multiple system that they have all got to merge into one mind. And I didn't try to do that with Cisco. I didn't want her programmers to have to get rid of their programming and join some frivolous front altar. No. The programming altars were very helpful in understanding the programming. So why not use the MPD to your own advantage instead of looking at it as the problem?
That was a really great answer, and I think it'll be empowering. That can be frustrating if somebody feels that that's the standard that they have to meet and it's just not happening year after year after year. I think what you said was really good. It's a good balance of both. It's possible to integrate, but it's also not the end all be all. You can have parts that work together. They don't have to become a hive mind. They can share memories and figure out a strategy of moving forward together as a team instead of as one. So one of the things you've been talking about for a long time that's been very prevalent, especially now, and it's becoming even more prevalent, is the conversation of aliens, UFOs, UAPs. However, this conversation is thrown over here. It's completely compartmentalized from mind control and MK Ultra. And aliens, abductees, people who have seen and interacted with UFOs, they're in their own disclosure community, and there's no crossover between these two communities. You've been crossing it over for a long time, but so far there hasn't been kind of a push to bring these things together in a way that can be very beneficial for both movements, because as you know, listening to survivor testimonies, you hear about alien programming, you hear about UFOs, abductions, experimentation from non-human entities and aliens. And I just wanted you to touch on that, especially if there's new information on mind control and UFOs and aliens that you've come across since your books came out. But even what you detailed in your books was just amazing. But I'd love to share some of that with the current audience who's being pulled in both of those directions and not making the connections that you have.
Wow. Okay. You just opened up a huge Pandora's box. Such an incredible big subject. But I'm going to say some really foundational things so that we can try to build upon those.
Okay.
The connection between flying saucer, or not flying saucers, they call them UFOs, unidentified. We don't want to call them flying saucers. UFOs, the connection between UFOs, aliens, and programming and the occult world. There is a very direct connection between Satanism and UFOs, a very strong one. You go into satanic covens and you can find 100% of these Satanists have been abducted. Okay. There is a very strong connection. There's a very strong connection between the whole alien phenomenon and the occult world. Now, what are these aliens? And if you, I cannot step a person through all of the research I have done.
Of course.
But at a certain point, you realize these are not aliens from another planet, but these are they're fallen angels or demonic entities. and they are impersonating being aliens. And perhaps there are some alien races that are manufactured beings. They're not entirely, not all of them are fallen angels, but the whole subject is a very evil, dark subject, and there aren't good aliens. And the alien programming that was being done during the 1930s, not 1930s, excuse me, 1990s, was far more powerful than the rest of the programming. So this is it's very high level program. And the therapists have been touching the lighter programming, but the alien programming has been very hard to touch. So this is something very important to the movers and shakers, whatever you want to call the cabal. I call them by their own name, which is Illuminati, which is generational Satanism. The plans that the generational Satanists have are, quite frankly, that at some point they will turn this planet over to the aliens. Okay. Now, really, who do they want to turn this over? Well, I believe that what they really want to do, but they're not going to say it this way, is they're going to turn it over to these fallen angels. Now, think about this. If you were somebody on the street and somebody ran up and they said, "Do you want this world turned over to fallen angels?" Then the normal person is probably going to say, "No, no, we already have enough problems, no." But if you ran up to somebody and you said, how about the humanity solve our problems? We're going to turn this planet over to an evolved race of aliens that are 500,000 years further along in evolution. And they're going to go, well, that sounds like a good idea. Humanity's not been solving our own problems very well, and they're further along. Yeah, let's do it. So this is where we're going with all this. The world's going to be turned over, if we continue on their plan like their plan is. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen just because they plan it, but that's what the plans are. And so, yeah, there are some people that recognize that they're a program multiple, that they have the kind of programming that that's written in my formula book, and they really like me, they look up to me, and they're heavily involved with aliens. Some of them, think that they've had children with aliens, and on, and that they're communicating with aliens on a regular basis. I will give an example of a man that was coming over to my house, and we spent quite a lot of time getting to know his story and his situation. And he said that he loved the aliens. They were this advanced race. He looked forward to spending time with them, and he just had all these positive thoughts about them. And then you would ask, well, what's going on when you're giving these UFO trips? Well, they buggered his rear end. Well, did you give them permission? No, they did it on their own. They buggered his rear end on their own. Well, what is this? This is mind control, Emma. I mean, if somebody can take you and they can sexually abuse you and you love them, what is that? That's mind control.
Yep.
This isn't an enlightened race of aliens. It's mind control. And if the abuser can make you think that they're an enlightened race of aliens, and you love them because of it, they can do anything to you. So this is what we got going on, and so this whole alien phenomenon is just an offshoot of the mind control and the occult agenda for this world.
Thank you for answering that. When I've listened to a lot of these UFO whistleblower and disclosure testimonies from people who are focused on that and they're not talking about mind control or anything, most of their testimonies have allegations and accusations of being sexually abused as a child. And it's just interesting to me how people don't put that together. And then you talk to a mind control survivor and they've interfaced with advanced technologies. They have, experienced demons and spirits and these alien creatures in their own testimonies. And I just feel like there's been this deliberate separation of both of these movements, so nobody puts it together. They want us looking up in the sky at the aliens and not here at our own government, and not at the experiments that are taking place amongst that. So your answer is just really appreciated. I think it'll help connect some dots for people today who are sort of battling with looking at these two different disclosure movements and, trying to figure it out and just running in a hamster wheel. My next question for you, you mentioned earlier suicide programming. So one of the most amazing things, because of people like you who have pioneered so much work allowing survivors to understand what they went through and then finding the courage to come speak out, many of them don't know that that is a mechanism that can deploy at any time if they have that no-talk programming and they talk. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of knowledge about this. And one of the biggest worries I have for our community is that it's so wonderful more people are waking up, but with that comes the risk that suicide rates and self-harm rates could also go up. Do you have any advice on ways that survivors can stay grounded if and when they experience that, if they don't know that they have this type of programming and they're at home, they're remembering they're talking, and all of a sudden it just kicks in? What can somebody do when that happens to help them manage getting through that without harming themselves?
Another big subject. It's a good subject, though, because it's going to be an ever-present reality for a survivor. There are so many different reasons why somebody would want to end their life. And first, I'm going to talk about hope. Because like with Cisco, excuse me, I itched on my forehead. Wasn't trying to do any occult symbol or something. It's really hard to give any public talks because if I scratch myself, everybody start, the detractors. Oh, you're trying to do a hand signal. Watch out.
Yeah.
So going back to Cisco and where she would be at, sometimes I'll be quite frank, and I'm not saying this to discourage people. I try to be realistic, and sometimes as a survivor, it just seems hopeless. The walls that you have to climb, the distance that you have to go for healing is so far, and you start thinking about things and it just feels hopeless. And you're trying to think to yourself, how can I get through this? Well, here's what I would tell Cisco. I don't know if this will be helpful to other people, but I would say to Cisco, where you're at is like being locked in a totally dark room and you're groping around for the doorknob and you can't find it. And it's scary. It's terrifying. You don't know where that doorknob is to get out of the darkness. I'll hold on to your help. Your hope. I'll hold on to your hope. I'll be here and I'll hold on to it. Okay. Now that brings up something that I strongly believe, and I believe every survivor, if they really want to have a chance, has to find a good friend that will stay by their side and help them through this. You need that. And the survivors I have seen that were able to make progress had that. But that's pretty rare. It's pretty rare to find someone who'll stick with you through thick and thin and be there as a friend. Because a good friend will do more good, or at least as much good, as an expensive therapist. Okay? So that's what you need. And you need to have that friend that's going to be there and say, I know you can't see any hope. I'll hold on to your hope for you. Okay? So you got that going. In other words, I'm being realistic. You look at things and sometimes you can't see that there's any hope. I've looked around for that doorknob and I cannot find it. I've been all the way around all four walls and I'm still not bumping into it. And the thing of it is sometimes that doorknob is just a few inches away. It's there. So I'll give you an example. So we had a doctor that came from New York who was a program multiple, and he had been dealing with his programming for 20 years. And he was very, very discouraged because he was double-blinded. And in other words, in his mind, he couldn't go any direction because there were all these double blinds. And Cisco's programming altar, and I haven't worked with Cisco for years, so I don't know where she's at. Head-wise or whatever. But at that time, her programmers were right there able to deprogram. And she told him, hey, you can walk right through that wall. It's just an artificial wall. In your mind, it's a wall that you can't go through. You can walk right through it. And he did. And so here for 20 years, he had felt trapped. And he walked through that double bind with her help. And in 5 minutes, he was laughing from his belly. It was just totally amazing to him. All this fear that he had, all this feelings of being trapped, and he walked right through it. And he realized the programming's a lie. A lot of this programming is a lie, but it's hard to break through the lies. If you can, you'll realize, oh, these lies were keeping me in my prison. Yes, you're being kept in prison by lies. You're being kept in prison by programming. So there are answers, but we need people like Cisco's programmers to walk people through the answers. And unfortunately, they've taken down the people that could do that. Let's see what else I can say on hope. Hope is essential. It's essential for everybody. I mean, not just for program multiple. Hope is essential for everybody. When I get up in the morning, I have to have hope. This is essential. And so it's a worthwhile goal. It's a worthwhile subject that the therapist should be encouraging the parts that the therapist is working with to have that hope, and sometimes being sometimes you don't want to know everything. It's like, and I'm sorry that I'm like lay everything out for people, because that may not be the best. It may not be good for people to realize that they're going to have to work on this for years. I'll give an analogy. One of my books is Be Wise as Serpents. And a large part of Be Wise as Serpents is showing how basically, there's a few exceptions, but basically all the Christian churches have been corrupted and tampered with. And, I go denomination by denomination and show how high ranking ministers in these denominations are Freemasons, and I show how things are being controlled, blah, blah, blah. Okay. If you have somebody who's a new Christian, who's struggling spiritually, if you show them what they're up against and that all these churches are corrupted, it can be overwhelming. So much so that they just they just give up. So you have to be a little bit discreet in how much you share with somebody. You don't want to quench their zeal to be free. You don't want to quench their hope. And I always tell people there's hope. And so sometimes it's not a positive to tell someone all the struggles that they might have to go through. You just want to focus on the bridge that's ahead. That's a good analogy right there. Is so many housewives, when they're talking to their husband, they want to cross all these bridges way out there, and it's like, no, wait. Let's cross the bridge that's in front of us. We'll get to that bridge later. We'll deal with it. But right now, let's just focus on what's in front of us. Okay? That's enough. And that's Christ-like. That's what Christ said. He said, every day has enough problems sufficient to itself. Don't start worrying about 20 years later. Deal with the problem that's at hand. That's something that you can deal with. You start dealing with something that's 20 years out, you can't even deal with it. And that will bring hopelessness. You're like, whoa, how am I going to deal with all these problems? You don't need to. That's 20 years out. Don't even worry about it. Just deal at what's at hand, the issue at hand. Okay? Let's be successful with what we have to deal with right now. We have to make this meal. We're going to make a good meal today for lunch. We're not going to worry about what we're going to eat 20 years from now. That's irrelevant. Don't fret. Don't wrap yourself up in knots about these issues way down the road. And that's one thing that might help some of the survivors, is for them to come back and just work on what's in front of them. Because there's a lot of work to do. And it's not beneficial to get ahead of yourself. One step at a time.
That was a really great answer. Thank you so much for that. We need more hope. And there's a lot of people not feeling hope. They're in despair and they're struggling. And I know your words are going to really mean a lot to people. And my final question for you, sort of as to piggyback off what you were just talking about, if you had the world stage and had everybody's ear and could say whatever you want, what would you express on behalf of the information that you've learned? What would you want the world to know today in 2025 after all these 35 plus years that you've been speaking out and pioneering this work?
I would like people to be aware of good and evil. Christ and Satan. There's a battle going on. There's a battle for your mind. And a lot of times I would have to go out to Kinko's and photocopy stuff, and people look over my shoulder and they see that I'm exposing trauma-based mind control and stuff like that. And then they would come at me and they would say, well, that's just your opinion that it's Satanism. Well, that's just your opinion that Satanism's evil. Oh, that's just your opinion. They're not facing the fact that we are in a battle, all of us, between good and evil, Satan and Christ. And I have seen people that were trapped in all kinds of things. I won't even mention some of the things, that seemed like impossible situations they were trapped in. And they were able to get through those and change their life with the power of Christ. And I have seen a lot of survivors make a lot of progress because spiritually they had Christ and they had Christians that loved, that would be that friend to help them. And we're in such a battle, and people look out there and they're just, they don't take the scriptures for real. They don't take the kinds of struggles that the Bible talks about for real. The Bible talks about us having humility. The Bible talks about us having love. That has nothing to do with doctrines. It has nothing to do with denominations, and people look out there, they see someone who's arrogant, who's not loving, but he struts around and acts like somebody powerful and important. And they go, oh, okay, he's going to be our savior, Well, no. The problem is having humility, having love, and so that's what I would say, is to make people really aware of this war that's going on. And so one of the blessings that my material, my books have brought to people is it's pulled some people out of just, this this fog where they didn't really see that there was evil and that there was good. And they just like go through, like they've been programmed to think, oh, well, all technology is neutral. There aren't evil people. Everybody's got their own opinion. These people want to say that Satanism's evil, but it isn't. It's just another religion. Everybody's got their own ideas. No. There are evil people out there. There are people that look good that are that have a dark side to them, and we need to be aware of this war and protect ourselves. That's what I would say. And when you see that there's a good side and there's a light side, it gives you hope. It relates to the last question you have. When people realize that I came up and I looked evil face to face, and we're talking about some horrendous evil, and I didn't blink, and I'm still here, people. I'm still here, and there are other people too that are standing up for what's true and what's good, and and God is blessing them. And so even if tomorrow I would be a martyr, that doesn't subtract from the fact that there is also a good side. There is a good side here in this world. And it's not all dark. There's a dark side and there's a light side. God and Christ is there for people, and we need to find the good side, and we need to find those things that will empower us, because the good side has power too. Otherwise, this world wouldn't have anybody that was good in it. But they're still good. They're still good. And hopefully that gives people some hope that in the midst of this battle, there's still two sides.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for that answer. And I'm really honored and grateful you came on today. You were a big inspiration for my podcast. And like I said, many of my guests have not only referenced you, but have named you as a crucial part of their healing journey. And so the work that you've done, it might be very thankful you have been treated with such cruelty. But I do also want you to know that there's so many people you'll never hear from and who will never get to tell you thank you for everything that you've done. And you've changed so many countless lives.
Well, God be with all of you and bless all of you. Thanks for listening. And I give you all my love and encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we stop recording, I just wanted you and Josh to be able to share again where people can obviously buy your books, Fritz, and then Josh, where people can connect with you.
Yeah, my email has been the same for many years. It's springmeiermessages@hotmail.com. And so, send me an email. Springmeier is SPRINGMEIER, messages, MESSAGES, @hotmail.com. If you want any of my books, that's how you're going to have to get them, because I no longer have Facebook kicked me off. My Facebook account got hacked and stolen, and Facebook wouldn't let me get back on with another account. And my website's down, and I don't know if I'll ever get the time to rebuild it. And so that's the way to get in touch with me. And just be aware that they have done an excellent job of scrubbing me from the internet. And I'm surprised that people like Emma still find out about me. Okay.
And Joshua, do you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yeah, just on Twitter. I really don't have a lot of reach out. Just on my Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, and that's pretty much it. Sorry, I was just non-existent today. I'm just getting over this insane nicotine withdrawal. I've had to quit after 27 years. It's time. I just got to quit. My body's shutting down. So sorry, I was just so lame today.
No, you weren't. Thank you for making this happen and for being here. And we'll have to do it again sometime and, bring Fritz back on and ask some more questions. And you can, of course, contribute. So thank you guys so much for coming on today. And thank you, the listeners. We couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are the biggest blessing. You guys are the light in the darkness. You're the reason why we do what we do. So thank you guys so much for listening. God bless you all. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.